This is a production of World Video Bible School. To God be the glory.
Welcome back to this another lesson on learning to use the Greek New Testament. As you have already seen, the course title for today's lesson has to do with learning about adjectives of the first and third declensions. Now, we've already talked about some adjectives in previous lessons that had to do with the first and second declensions, and we looked at some of those adjectives and how they were declined, and that they were declined just like the nouns were, and can be declined as a masculine, feminine, or neuter noun. Well, today we're going to learn about a few more adjectives that are found in the first declension, and also, of course, in the third declension. And then we'll look at a couple of numerals, and also we'll focus on the comparison of adjectives from chapter 18 in your book. In fact, if you'll go ahead and take out your textbook and turn over to page 119 of this particular edition of your textbook, and we're going to start off today with the vocabulary words, and I'll call for those in just a moment. So as we go through those vocabulary words, we're going to do something a little bit different in that when I talk about a vocabulary word, we'll look at it, and then we'll go to the chart in your textbook. We'll display it on the screen, and I'll point out some significant items about each of those words. So at this time, let's go to the vocabulary words. And what I'd like for us to do is take a look at that first adjective there, hapas. Hapas, and that has the rough breathing mark over the alpha. It's not, again, listed on the screen, but it is in your book. And then you also need to notice hapasa and hapan. Okay, each of those has reference to each, every, all, or whole. And the intensive form, basically, is just of pas is found there. Now, what I want you to notice about this is how it is declined and on what basis it is declined. So let's go to the paragraph or the paradigm on page 114, and we'll take a look at it now here on your screen. Notice that pas is declined on the basis of somewhat similar to the third declension in the masculine now with regard to the paradigm that we learned, archon, archontos, archonti, archonta. You see it there. All right. Now, so simply just pas is our nominative or vocative ending for every or each, and then you can see the endings there as they go down. The same way in the plural for the masculine, pontes, ponton, and pasin, and pantas. Now, but what I want you to notice, though, is this, that when this particular adjective, okay, the word for all, accompanies a feminine noun, or is found in the feminine form, then it reverts back to the first declension noun endings for the feminine. Remember, as, except they're ace, and of course sometimes it'll be ace, ain, or as, an, but you can see it, ace, an, and so we know those endings. Those are some that we're familiar with. Okay, and as far as the neuter is concerned, then back to our third declension noun endings, and you can see the feminine, the plural, I, on, ice, os. Okay, all right. So that's the word hapas, hapas, or hapasa, for each or every, all, or whole. All right, and let's take a look at the next word. The next word is, and I want you to be sure that you notice that in your book, above the iota, all right, notice the diphthong, the epsilon iota, the diphthong a, that above that there is a rough breathing mark, which means that that is pronounced hace, and that is different from ace. Now you'll remember, and if we could go to the board here, I want to call your attention to the fact that ace looks like that, okay, but this is hace with the rough breathing mark. And ace, basically, is our preposition meaning into. All right, so let's go back and take a look at that word again on the screen. All right, and notice that ace means, or hace means one. Ace means into. Hace, with the H sound, means one. Or mia, all right, and hen. Hen means one as well. So be sure that you notice that particular difference between those two words, because as I've noted before, that we're not learning those accent marks and the rules regarding them, but we are pointing them out when they are significant, when those breathing marks are significant, to differentiate between two words. Okay? Notice also in your textbook that there is a particular chart on page 115 that has a paradigm for the number 1. Let's take a look at that now. Now, notice here, as far as the masculine form for the word for one, okay, hes, henas, and then heni, and then hena, that these are the words that you're going to use when you'll find it in its masculine form. When it's found in its feminine form, it'll be mia, mias, and mia, and then mian. Okay, and then when it's used in the neuter, it'll look like this: hen, henas, heni, and hen. Now, just a moment. Let's go back to that word on the screen that we just used a moment ago, and I want you to see that in our vocabulary list, that all three of those words are listed there in order, and all of the vocabulary words are listed that way as well. So let's take a look at it at this point. Hes, mia, and en. The first one is the masculine form, the second one is the feminine form, and the third one is the neuter form. So notice that in your vocabulary card or in your textbook, that when you go down through there, that's why you have 3 different words there. It's just masculine, feminine, and neuter and how they're formed. All right, now, another thing that I want you to notice as we look back here again on this chart with regard to the number 1 is that even though the nominative is not the same, again, the masculine follows what that paradigm that I had you remember: archon, archontas, archonti. See, there's still that iota. Archonta. See, so pay attention. Even though the tau isn't there, you still have that alpha, that iota, that sigma for the genitive, and that's what we learned. Remember, as we looked at that master case chart ending that was provided from the Mounts text that I showed you in the last lesson. Okay, and then again the feminine forms from the first declension, as, an. Okay, and you can remember that. So what I'm trying to show you is just reviewing the material that's in your textbook to show you the differences, but yet the similarities of some things that you're already accustomed to. Okay, at this point, what I'd like for us to do now is then go to the next word. So let's take a look at the next word in the vocabulary list, and it is the word megas. Megas, that's our masculine form. Megale is the feminine, and mega is the neuter form. And that word means great or large, great or large. And so what I'd like for us to do is look at the paradigm now in your textbook on page 116. Okay, now notice on the chart here that even though this particular one has also the word paulus, which are 2 irregular adjectives, and but we want to be sure and note both of these. But right now on our vocabulary list, we're just on megas, but they are declined in irregular ways compared to other adjectives, and so that's why attention is being given to this, because they do occur. Megale and paulus does occur quite often in the New Testament. In fact, I think the book mentions that the feminine forms follow the declension of phone, and that much or plural or many occurs 353 times. And then the book goes on to say, of course, megas, great, occurring 194 times. But at any rate, notice that on the masculine forms, we pretty well know these. The sigma ending again, see that sigma ending? Like in the masculine, and as for second declension noun endings. So the sigma ending, and then you have u, which is actually the upsilon ending is actually the letter omega, and then the nu again. So as, u, o, an. So we know those, and then they follow the feminine form that we're familiar with, a, ace, a, ain. Okay, and then for the neuter, a, u, o, a, and again. while though that's not exactly the way that you would have learned it in the neuter, other declensions, they sort of mix and match there in a way. But again, all things you're familiar with. So you're going to recognize that stem megala, megalase. You see that ascending, you know, its genitive form and so forth. Now let's take a look at the plural form of the word megalos or mega, and also we'll look at polis while we're there. So take a look now here on the chart. You can see that we know those endings. If we're looking at the word for polis, poloi, polon, ois, oion, ois, us, ion, isos, aon, ois, and then for the word we're looking at for mega, see how they follow those masculine endings, oion, ois, us. So, and then the feminine for the first declension, ion, isos. Okay, so again, things that you know, just wanted to point those out, that you do need to be aware of these new adjectives because they are used quite regularly in the New Testament, or quite often at least. All right, let's take a look at the next vocabulary word then, and that next word is medes. Okay, medes, and medema and meden, and those are the words for no one or none or nothing, and they are declined just as the numeral haste is that we looked at just a few moments ago. So declined on that same paradigm. All right, let's go to the next word then. Okay, udes, and then the feminine form, udemia, and then the neuter, uden. And notice that these have the same meaning as the word that we just looked at, medes, but this is the word that's used with the indicative mood. The previous word is the word that you use with all the other moods that we haven't got to yet, like the imperative mood, the operative mood, and the subjunctive, those moods that we'll discuss near the end of the course, but just wanted to make that distinction. All right, let's go to the next word then, and our next word is pasa, and pan, which means each, every, all, whole, and so forth, and declined again as the hapas that we saw earlier. All right, the next word then is paulus and pale and paulo, for much or many, All right, the next word, as we go to adjectives and numerals of the third declension now, the first one there you see on the screen is alethes, and then the next one, as far as the next form, alethus, and that word means true. All right, let's take a look at that now, as presented on page 117 of your textbook. I want you to notice how that particular adjective is declined. It has a different set of endings in some ways, although we're going to be familiar with the sigma ending, and you can even see the us here, and then our iota ending as well, and then the eta. So just sort of memorize this one for alethes and know for meaning true. And then notice over here on the plural form again, the own genitive plural, both in the masculine, feminine, and in the neuter, and again this iota with a movable nu. And so again, things that you're familiar with somewhat, but just to denote some of the differences. All right, let's take a look now at our next word on the vocabulary list. All right, duo. That means two, and of course that comes, you can hear the English word duo that comes from, or two that comes from this particular Greek word. All right, let's take a look now at the next word, dodeca. That's the word for 12. All right, the next word, maidson, or maidson, and that's the word for greater or larger, and then pente for 5. Our word pentagon comes from that word, okay, and also the word Pentecost, 50 days. It's 5 or multiples of 5, Okay? And then the next word, tesaurus, tesaurus, or tesara, meaning four. And then the next word, and our last word, is trace, tria. Well, you can, of course, probably recognize that in our English form. It's the word for three. It's the word for three. Okay, well, that has to do, that concludes then our vocabulary words on these adjectives and these numerals from this chapter. Now, something else that this chapter focuses on now that we want to turn our attention to, and that is comparison of adjectives. Comparison of adjectives. Now, these adjectives can be used by way of comparison, and to compare two things in a sentence, and we'll see an example of that a little bit later on. And yet an adjective can be used in a positive sense, it can be used in a superlative sense, or just by way of comparison. And the way that we know that is by a morpheme. Remember, a morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning in any given language. It may not be a word in and of itself, but it's letters together, or a letter that carries with it meaning. And so a morpheme is inserted within the adjective to indicate a comparison going on, or it being used in a superlative sense. So let's go to the board now and let me show you what I'm talking about. It's also in your book. Our word dikaios here is an adjective, and it means righteous. For example, the righteous man or the righteous woman or whatever, but in masculine sense it'd be the righteous man. This is what we refer to as the pure positive sense of it. And whenever you see a word in your vocabulary list, you'll note that they will be in their positive form. Okay? Now, but when we talk about it being used in a comparative sense, then this morpheme, tau, epsilon, rho, ter, is added in there just before our ending, okay? And so it's inserted in there, and when you see that, dikaiateros, ter, then you know it's being used in a comparative sense and would be in reference to this man is more righteous, and then someone else mentioned in the context of the sentence, or this city is more righteous, or whatever the case may be. Now, the same thing can be done if you insert it in over here in regard to the feminine form, and if we had the neuter form out there as well, be the same thing, the same morpheme. Now, when we go to the superlative use of the comparison of adjectives, or the use of adjectives in a superlative sense, then you have the tau, alpha, tau morpheme, tot, being used there to mean the most righteous. So this man is the most righteous one, or more, the most righteous of all. And if it regard to a woman, the most righteous woman, you'd see the alpha ending, but still the ter, that should be tot. I miswrote that, and so that should be, and I'll correct that here at this point, but anyway, that should be tot as well in that particular sentence. Okay, well, let's take a look now at an example of the use of this comparative adjective, okay, in this sentence I have here. And this one did not come from your textbook. It just is one that I found elsewhere. But ta, moran, tu, theu, saphoteron, ton, anthropon, estin, okay. So we go back here, and this is being used in a noun sense, the foolishness, all right, of God, okay, the foolishness of God. And then we have here the word wisdom, okay, but it's saying, we've got the ter there, you see the ter, or the tau, epsilon, rho, is telling us that this wisdom is being used in a comparative sense. So the wisdom of God is being compared to that of men, okay, and here's our verb that we're going to insert down here. So the wisdom of God is wiser, okay, or is more wise, all right, than of men, okay, than that of men. And so there you see an example of the comparative use of the adjective, okay? All right, well, having said that, let's now turn our attention to some translation exercises that are in your book. All right, now here's number one from your textbook. Let's read it. Pontes, gar, hemarton, kai, husteronte, okay, tes, doxe, tu theu. Now, and by the way, from now on, the sentences are all going to come straight out of the Bible. The other ones typically were phrases similar to what was in the Bible, but they had to change them up somewhat because we did not know certain things that would make it more difficult for us to translate. And now many of the words are words that you know already. There'll be a few exceptions in which the information will be supplied. But anyway, as we go back and we look at this, we can see that pontes is our word for all, okay? And then here is gar, always post-positive, for all. And then here is hamarton, which is our word for sin, okay? Now, hamartano is the... All right, hamartano is the word that we know from the present active indicative. Now, this goes to the past. And so if we wanted to put an epsilon on here, that what ends up happening is that lengthens that alpha, okay? That lengthens that alpha to an eta. We go to our endings, on, sn, aminete, on. And so we can see then that it is basically aorist, all right? Simple past tense. So all have sinned, okay? Accusative case. And in this word, means fallen short, basically. Fallen short, masai tai, okay, of masai tai, methasai entai, okay, they, talking about these people that have sinned, all have fallen short of the glory of God, okay, and we know that phrase from before. All right, let's take a look at number two. Ta, panta, dia, autu, kai, ace, auton, ectistai, kai, autos, estin, pra, ponton. Okay, now, this is kind of an interesting sentence here, and one that we want to stop and take focus on for just a moment. But notice our word panta, meaning, all or every. But here we can recognize, because of this article, that this is, in fact, nominative, neuter, and so it is plural, all right? And you say, well, how do you know it's accusative or if it's plural? Again, I think the context here bears it out as far as our subject. And so we're going to use this in a substantive. It's going to be a substantive, using it as a noun. And we're going to say that this means all, and because it's neuter, all things. Okay? So all things. All is our word here. If it had been a feminine form, we'd have said all women. Masculine form, all men. But here it's all things. And then dia, remember dia before it precedes autu, or precedes rather a word that begins with a vowel, then our vowel is going to drop out and we have this then apostrophe here. So all things through him, okay, through him, and then into or for him. And then here's a word that we're perhaps not familiar with, but it is a perfect tense, okay, a perfect tense form, masai tai, okay, third person singular, perfect tense, and here is our time morph right here, but it means created, okay, or was built, came into existence basically, were built. So all things through him were built or were created, I think is how sometimes it's translated, and for him, okay, and for him. And, okay, autos, simply meaning he, right, nominative case, and he, and of course, this is a personal pronoun. It has an antecedent talking about the one here, this pronoun, which we would have known from Colossians chapter 1 if we'd read the context. It was talking about Jesus. And he, here is our to-be verb, is, right, me, he is, third person singular, before, preposition, and then here is our word that we learned this particular chapter, pontos, but ponton, okay, the plural form. And you say, well, why is it in the genitive case? Because remember, is only found when accompanied by a genitive form, all right? It requires the genitive. So he is before all things, in order to comply with the context of the sentence. So all things through him and for him were created. Okay? Jesus did it. And then he is before all things. He is before all things. And by the way, on this perfect tense, just to emphasize something, remember what the perfect tense does? It speaks of something that took place in the past, but the effects remain at the time of speaking. Okay, so the creative act that Jesus was involved in, that he performed, remained, Paul said, at the time of speaking. He holds the worlds together, as it were. All right, let's take a look at this last sentence now. This is from 1 Corinthians 12:13, and let's read it. Kai, gar, en, heni, pneumatai, hemes, should be a rough breathing mark there, pontes, ace, hen, soma, ebaptisthemen. All right, now, here is some applications of the rules that we have talked about and being aware of some things. Look at this word in here. That's actually a preposition. All right, in. But then you compare it to hen, which means one. Okay, one. Well, notice that also one, the word one, is declined differently. Then you go over here, and in, if you'll notice, between hen and henny, they both mean one, but this one is dative case, all right, singular, because it goes along with spirit, dative case singular. It's a third declension noun. But then over here to hen, all right, it's neuter. It follows the neuter declension. If you were to look in your textbook, you would see that. And the reason for that is because of soma being neuter as well. So you have an example there of the word one being used in different forms. In other words, that number is declined, whereas in English it would not be. But pay attention again to those rough breathing marks, because here you have an example in this sentence of in, the preposition, and then hen, the number. Okay, hen, the number. So let's put all this together. This kai gar, sort of a double conjunction here, basically meaning for indeed or something like that. So for indeed, in one body, okay, in one body, we, right here's our personal pronoun, nominative case, hemes, hemon, hemin, hemas, we all, okay, all right, so for indeed by one Spirit, okay, and this is our basically in here, and requires the dative, and basically this is the agency then by what something is going to take place in this prepositional phrase that we'll see later and connect with the verb. For indeed by one Spirit we are all, and here is our verb, because we need a verb there, and there it is, just simple past tense, aorist, okay, baptisma, for baptism, baptizo, I baptize, okay, but this is, see the time morph, past time morph, and then they for our passive, and men is oase, amen, first person plural, so we were baptized. See, we didn't baptize because it's in the passive. We were baptized into one body, okay. How did that happen? By means of the Spirit. Okay, for indeed by means or by the Spirit, we, all of us, were baptized into one body. Okay, so you can begin to see a little bit about how the pos and pontes work, and begin to see a little bit, like even here on this henny with regard to meaning one, you can see the iota. That iota is telling me dative. When I see that, I need to think of dative on the end of that. So those are just some examples from this chapter of some of the things that we have learned, and sort of seeing together there in translating those sentences. That's all we're going to do today, and I'd like at this time to encourage you to do the following in regard to your homework now. Memorize the vocabulary words, read chapter 19, translate selected Bible passages of your choosing. So if you'll do all of those three, keep working on those vocabulary words, work at some sentences, read ahead, then you'll be ready for next time. It's been good to be with you. We appreciate so much your kind attention, and I look forward to being with you again in our next lesson.